what to what. And in details, that's all being worked out by each and every one involved with the Transition Town movement. But in a very, very general sense, of course, what we're talking about is the transition from a globalized fossil fuel-based economy to a relocalized post-fossil fuel-based economy. From unsustainability to sustainability. So that's the essence of the transition. But again, the details we discover as we go along. Very briefly, my knowledge of the Transition Town movement is as follows. Back in 2005, I was invited to come to Kinsale, Ireland to speak at a conference organized by a fellow named Rob Hopkins, whom I had never heard before. I had no idea what all this was about. So I went to this conference and met this amazing fellow. I was very impressed with Rob. He's completely unassuming, brilliantly intelligent. He's a permaculture teacher, and at that time he was teaching at the Further Education College in Kinsale. And in 2004, he had heard something about some concept called peak oil and some documentary called The End of Suburbia. How many have seen The End of Suburbia? Right, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. He showed The End of Suburbia to his students, and they were in shock. They suddenly, you know, all of their ideas about society and the future of society were in question. So he organized them to do a plan for transitioning Kinsale over the course of the next 15 years to a post-fossil fuel economy. And his students divided up into interest groups having to do with transportation, food, land use, education, healthcare, water, everything you can think of, because all of those things have been developed over the course of the past few decades in the context of cheap fossil fuels. So we have, you know, cheap fossil fuel food, we have cheap fossil fuel transportation and everything else. All of that's going to have to be rethought. So this is what his students got involved in, and they produced a wonderful energy descent action plan, which had just been finished when I got to Kinsale in 2005. Okay, so at that point, it became necessary for reasons irrelevant to describe here, for Rob to move back to his place of origin in southern England, and he decided to go to Totnes and finish off his PhD. So his PhD thesis actually is the Transition Town movement. He's doing it as he's researching it. And so Totnes became the first official transition town. And the transition town process is actually different from what went on in Kinsale. Rather than starting with a plan, the transition town process starts with people. And starts with people's interests and needs and excitement, and then grows from that. Because there are already people in every community working on what is, in effect, post-fossil fuel healthcare, food production, you name it. It's just that mostly they don't know each other, and they're working more or less in isolation. They think their issue is, you know, the important one, and it is important, but they don't necessarily work in coordination with all of the other people doing what actually is going to be necessary in a coordinated framework as we make this transition to a sustainable society. So what he did in Totnes was first to just put on film showings of End of Suburbia and other peak oil videos and climate change videos and so on, bring in public speakers. Had me come to Totnes and speak in the town hall with like 400 people. Totnes is not a large community, but already he was getting enormous turnouts for these.
7,000.
Yeah, it's like a 7,000 person community, so figure out the percentage for yourself. He was getting a tremendous interest from the community in all of this. And then they had the unleashing Up to that point, it was just public education, and the unleashing was when they finally declared themselves a transition town with a transition town Totnes logo, and very quickly they came out with an alternative currency, the Totnes pound, and the buzz in the community was just phenomenal. And it was only at that point, when the buzz had become almost irrepressible, that they began to talk to the town government, who were then invited to come on board, and of course they saw this as an opportunity to, take credit for something that was something exciting going on in their community, and to, be at the head of a parade that was already moving. So that was a way of getting the buy-in from the local government, and it was very effective. Very, very quickly, other communities observed this and wanted to do the same thing. I don't know if it was Rob's idea from the very beginning to make this a franchise, but in effect, that's what happened very, very quickly. And so Transition Town Penzance, Transition Stroud, even a neighborhood in London, Transition Brixton, started within just a few months. At this point, there are something like 35 or 36 transition towns that I'm aware of. There was a gathering of representatives from each of these this last May in southern England, and it was a very exciting affair. So this was an opportunity, of course, just for folks to compare notes and see what was working, because we're all making this up as we go along. We don't know just what a post-fossil fuel town is going to look like until we get there. One of the interesting parts of the transition town movement is the value that's placed in the members of the community that remember how to do things before the fast-paced, globalized society of the last few decades. Folks who lived through the 1930s and 40s and who still remember how to use hand tools and how to make things, and who remember how to work the local soil with the local weather patterns and so on, which of course are changing, but that's another story. And so collecting stories and learning skills, the great re-skilling is part of the transition town, relearning the skills that 100 years ago everybody knew, and that today so few of us know, the skills of self-sufficiency and the skills of community cooperation that enable a thriving community to work together and operate. So let's see, what else? I don't want to drone on too long here. Another of Rob's points of genius is his interest in human psychology and how behavior change actually happens and how it gets communicated from one person to another. So he's spent a great deal of time looking into the existing research literature on this. There's actually a whole field called social marketing that has been developing this study for some time. But he's looked into not only social marketing, but also the addiction process, because as my president has said, we're addicted to oil. Yes. Well, if that's true, what do we do about that? We have to think about what works to deal with an addictive situation. And of course,